Okay, picture this. It's a Sunday afternoon in August 1944. The summer heat is just hanging heavy over Chula Vista, California. Betty and Fred have just walked through the front door of their home on Twin Oaks Avenue. They're totally exhausted, eyes red, stinging with tears. They've literally just spent the entire day saying this incredibly painful goodbye to Fred's brother, Ed, who's heading off to the military. It's a heavy, emotional moment. They probably think the absolute hardest part of their day, maybe even their whole month, is over. But, as we're going to see in this explainer, the true test of their lives is sitting right there, waiting on their entryway table.
So I want you to really think about this for a second. Seriously, how do you pack up your entire life in just 13 days? Imagine you're just going about your normal routine, right? Raising your baby, working your 9 to 5, only to suddenly discover you've got less than 2 weeks, literally 13 days, to completely dismantle everything you've built and report for war. It's an almost unimaginable disruption for us today. But back in 1944, this was an everyday reality for millions of families. The sheer, breakneck speed of wartime deployment is just staggering, and it's exactly what Betty and Fred are about to face.
Let's dive into exactly how this went down. So, Betty puts their baby, Randy, down to sleep. She starts just kind of mindlessly sorting through the mail that had piled up while they were out. At first, it's just the usual, mundane stuff. The electric bill, a really sweet letter from her mom. But then she freezes. She pulls out this long, stark envelope, and right across the corner, printed in bold letters, it says, U.S. Government. She opens it, and man, the air just completely leaves the room. Her voice drops to a whisper as she asks her husband what it is. Fred comes in from the porch, takes one single look at the paper in her hand, and he knows immediately. Their world has just turned upside down.
Because what that letter says is that Fred has been ordered to report to the Navy for enlistment and boot camp on August 26th. 13 days. That is the ticking clock now hovering over this young family. In just 13 days, Fred has to wrap up his job, pack up an entire house, figure out a new living situation for his wife and infant child, and somehow mentally prepare himself to go to war. The urgency here is absolutely intense. We're not talking about a slight change of plans. It's a total life overhaul on an almost impossible deadline.
But here is where the story takes a really sharp, highly emotional turn. When Betty demands to know when this letter actually arrived, Fred admits he saw it yesterday. He actually hid it so it wouldn't ruin their last day with his brother Ed. But wait, it gets heavier. Fred confesses that this isn't even the first notice. He actually got his Selective Service greetings way back in early July. He'd already gone downtown, passed his physical at the induction station, and was officially classified 1A. He had known this exact moment was coming for 6 entire weeks.
As you can probably guess, Betty is devastated. Her response is an absolute gut punch. She looks at him and says, "You chose this, and you didn't tell me?" I mean, just imagine that realization. While she was standing out on the sidewalk, literally crying over her brother-in-law's deployment earlier that exact same day, Fred already knew he was going to be standing in his brother's shoes before the summer was out. For 6 weeks, she thought they had time while Fred was carrying this massive, life-altering secret all by himself. She feels completely betrayed, not just by the war taking her husband, but by her partner hiding the truth. Now, Fred tries to explain his logic, and it actually illustrates a really fascinating strategy. He tells Betty, look, if he just waited for the Selective Service to draft him, the Army would eventually call him up and they could send him literally anywhere. Total unknown placement. But by stepping forward at his physical and proactively volunteering for the Navy, he secured a guaranteed branch of service. Plus, since San Diego was a huge Navy hub, he figured he had a much better chance of being stationed right near home, at least for boot camp. So he wasn't just being reckless here. He was actually trying to control the uncontrollable so he could stay as close to his family as possible.
Fred also reveals this really profound, quiet sense of duty. He admits to her that, yeah, he felt like a coward for not telling her. He was watching them live their busy lives with baby Randy, and he just kept putting it off, unable to find that right moment to break her heart. But his core reason for going? Completely unshakable. He tells her, "I'll go because it's my turn," same as half the men on this street. He just couldn't sit safely at a desk while other guys, including his own brother, were out there fighting. It's such a powerful testament to that collective sense of responsibility everyone felt on the American home front back then.
Part 1. Resigning from Roar Aircraft. Let's see how this builds and moves from Sunday's intimate family secret to Monday's macro context. The very next morning, Monday, August 14th, the deeply personal reality of Sunday crashes headfirst into the American industrial war machine.
Fred heads into his job at Roar Aircraft Corporation, and he's carrying a resignation letter he'd carefully typed out on his Underwood typewriter the night before. I absolutely love this quote from it. "It has been a privilege to do my part here at Roar, toward the engines and cowlings that have gone out to the men flying the B-24s and B-17s. This highlights something we so often overlook. Fred wasn't just working some random office job. He was an industrial worker, building the literal engines for B-24 and B-17 bombers. He felt immense pride in that work. He was already contributing massively to the war effort, but the government decided they needed a soldier in uniform more than they needed a builder on an assembly line. It just goes to show how deeply everyday employment was tied up with this massive global conflict."
And when Fred actually hands this letter to his supervisor, Mr. Garfield, there's no shock. Zero. In fact, Mr. Garfield points out that Fred is actually the fourth man they've lost off that single factory floor since June. Think about that manpower drain for a second. The very factories tasked with building the arsenal of democracy were simultaneously being bled of their skilled workers just to fill the military ranks. It perfectly captures the intense strain the home front workforce was under during the summer of '44. Mr. Garfield just gives him this almost fatherly handshake and reassures him, saying Roar will still be building airplanes when he gets back.
Part 2. The village steps up.
Now, what's really interesting here is the timeline. By Tuesday evening, Fred and Betty are walking down Fern Street in the fading daylight, carrying their sleeping baby, heading to break the news to Betty's parents, Lyle and Emily. And they are about to find out exactly how much they need their community. The sheer velocity of the schedule they're facing is completely staggering. Look at this timeline. They go from a secret Selective Service notice in mid-July to the resignation on August 14th. Now, they somehow have to magically clear out their entire house by August 25th, just in time for Fred to report to the Naval Training Center on the 26th. It is a logistical nightmare. There is absolutely zero margin for error here.
So they tell Betty's father, Lyle. He absorbs the news, does the quick math, and realizes they have exactly 11 days. And boom, he immediately shifts into action mode. He commands this rapid-fire action plan. Step 1. Fred finishes his final week at Roar. Step 2. Together they clear out the entire Twin Oaks house. Step 3. Move Betty and the baby into the Carringers' back bedroom. And finally, pack all the couple's furniture into the garage. Lyle looks at them and promises they're going to get every last box of it done before the 25th. This is really how the shockwaves of the draft were handled back then, not by isolated individuals, but by extended families who stepped up to catch all the falling pieces.
So the crucial point to take away from this is that right in the middle of all this frantic planning and underlying terror, there is this incredible foundation of love and respect. Emily unconditionally offers up her home, making sure Betty knows she won't want for a single thing. And Lyle, he looks right at his son-in-law and delivers this incredibly poignant validation. "Your father would be proud of you, Fred. I know I am." In a time of such immense, overwhelming uncertainty, getting that kind of emotional anchor from a father figure, that was literally everything.
After all the frantic plans are made, the story leaves us with this beautifully sensory, grounding moment. Outside, the evening has faded into that deep, blue gold of a Chula Vista summer dusk. There's a radio playing faintly through an open window somewhere down the street. And the family, Fred, Betty, Lyle, Emily, Georgia, and the sleeping baby, well, the 6 of them simply sit together in the lamplight. For just a little while, they don't speak of the war at all. They just exist, a temporary, fragile peace before the chaotic storm of packing and deployment begins.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. We so often learn about the broad strokes of history, right? The massive battles, the famous generals, the sweeping global policies. But the true reality of history? It's lived in kitchens, it's lived on factory floors, and it's lived in quiet, lamp-lit living rooms. So I want to leave you with this to think about. What sudden, quiet sacrifices did ordinary families make during the war that history so often forgets? Try to think about all the Freds and Bettys of the world the next time you read about 1944. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. I really hope this provided a fresh lens on such a pivotal time in history. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.